Fellow entrepreneurs, welcome to Sink or Swim. My name is Bill Badran, and today I decided to do something a bit different. Now, we always talk about starting a business the right way and doing things the right way from the get-go. Now, this is part one of two parts in this whole series where I will be interviewing a business lawyer because I think that it's a fundamental thing, especially when you're starting a business. In part one of this video, I really want to stress the importance of incorporating if you want to incorporate, and actually look at the other options if you don't want to incorporate. And in part two, we're going to talk about, in case you want to be in partnership with someone, the importance of the shareholder agreement. So we don't want to bore you by making it one big long video. So I divided it in two. So I hope you enjoy this and tune in if you have any questions. Thank you. So welcome, Nadine.
Thank you.
So Nadine is a business lawyer, as I had mentioned. She operates mostly in Montreal, the great Montreal area, I would say. Most of her clientele is business. They are entrepreneurs from all phases. So I'm not gonna take away from you, so I will let you talk about a bit of what you do.
So my name is Nadine Chalati. I'm a corporate lawyer in Montreal, and I work with startups and small to medium-sized businesses, and I help them with their legal process from A to Z. So mainly we will work with different types of industries, but we mostly work with industries in the retail, food, and tech industries.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So now you start with many business. You actually do business with a lot of a lot of corporations that are in either the beginning phase or some medium phase, and some you have that are bigger.
Yes.
But since we want to talk about entrepreneurship and jumping into entrepreneurship, the startup phase, I believe, is the foundation, the most important part of any business. Can you tell me, personally, I had that problem when I began. I didn't know whether I should incorporate or not. When do you think someone should be incorporating?
So it depends ultimately on what type of business activities they have. Mm-hmm. And it also depends on how much money they intend on making.
Okay.
Those are probably the two first points that the entrepreneur should consider before they start their business, and if they should incorporate or not. Mm-hmm. So one of the first things is to consider what type of business activities do they have, and what is the liability associated with it as well. So for example, if I'm in the business of selling food, mm-hmm. or if I'm selling makeup or skincare, there's a lot of a much higher liability associated with that than someone who's, for example, selling pillows or buttons. Mm-hmm. Someone who's selling skincare has to be aware of the fact that they may be sued for what they're doing. For example, mm-hmm. let's say someone puts the product on their skin and they get an allergic reaction. Mm-hmm. If they're likely to be sued, it's better for them to be in an incorporated structure.
Okay. An
incorporated structure is very different than being in a sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorships are one and the same with the person that opens the business.
Yes.
So that means that if you're ever sued, your assets, your personal assets are at risk. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're in an incorporated business, you and the business are two completely separate entities. So if you're ever sued for example, a product that was faulty and someone died, for example, then your personal assets are not at risk. So your first step is always to consider how much liability is associated with your business activities. And then from there, you can decipher if it's worth it for you to be in that structure or not.
So it's not really a monetary, it's not a monetary figure that we should be looking out for. So it shouldn't be like, I made $100,000 this year, I should incorporate. It should really be about liability and whether or not you need all the money that comes with the corporation.
So it's both. I would first say the first threshold is the liability. Mm-hmm. Because even if you're making under $100,000 a year, if you have a business that has a high liability, then it's worth it for you to be incorporated, whether or not you make that money or not. Mm-hmm. Now, if, like I said, you're in the business of selling pillows, for example, mm-hmm. then if you make between $80,000 to $100,000 a year, you're going to benefit from being in an incorporated structure. Mm-hmm. Mainly because you most likely will not need all the money that you make for you to live, and therefore a lot of that money will be sitting inside the corporation.
100%.
And that's when you'll reap a lot of the tax benefits. So the threshold, we say that the rule of thumb is that if you're over 100,000, that you should for sure be incorporated, but also consider the fact that you may have certain liability associated with your activities.
100%.
And therefore at that stage, it's important for you to consider both and see, depending on what you're doing, if it's worth it for you to be incorporated or not.
And if I go into a partnership, do I automatically have to go incorporated, or can I be I cannot be a sole proprietor, but associated with someone? I have to definitely be incorporated and 50-50 or whatever the percentage might be. it has to be under an incorporation directly.
Yes. So you actually have different structures. You can actually be in a partnership, or you can be in an incorporation. So it really depends on which structure you want. A partnership is a bit cheaper in terms of the fees to open it, but in Quebec you need a partnership agreement. So that's where you rack up a lot of your fees. And in terms of the incorporation, it would be that you would each hold certain amounts of shares in the business, and depending on what stakeholding you each have and what you decide, maybe it could be 50-50, it could be 75-25, 49-51, it really depends. But you could be in either or structure depending.
That's amazing. So someone who basically wants to incorporate, obviously will cost a bit more than if he were to go into a partnership. And in terms of liabilities, you know, is the partnership the same protection as being incorporated? If someone were to, for example, you know, sue a partnership, would that you know, protect you more if you're in partnership or if you're in an incorporation?
So it ultimately depends on the type of partnership that you have. So there are SENCs in Quebec and there's SENCRLs. SENCRLs are protected. So it's a limited responsibility like you would have for an incorporation. But if you're in an SENC, it's just a partnership, your assets are not protected. It's the same thing as if you were in a sole proprietorship, but you're just in a partnership instead.
It's amazing.
So there that you have to be careful. Again, you want to consider your activities.
Yeah.
Typically for me, what I typically tell my clients is that first of all, go see an accountant, because if they think it's worth it for you to be incorporated, then that's a good time for it. And otherwise, you know, you do want to consider, like, what are you doing? What are your activities? How much are you willing to pay to start? Because all of those factor in your decision on if you should be one or the other.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So there you have it, folks. You now know the importance of incorporating and whether you should be incorporating. I hope you got as much information as you can from this video. And if you have any questions, please leave it down in the comment. Like the video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, guys, hit the goddamn bell.